What kind of man tears down a steel fence with his truck and dumps it on a developer's lawn? That's the question folks in the pine-covered foothills of Idaho were asking about Daniel Harper, a 60-year-old rancher who'd lived his life by one simple rule: you work for your land, you own it, and you don't let anyone carve it up without a fight. Daniel wasn't loud, didn't post his life online, didn't care for attention. But when someone slammed a chain-lock gate across his private trail, he didn't just get mad, it got even. Daniel's land wasn't much by today's standards, just a modest spread passed down through 3 generations of Harpers. It sat nestled in Idaho's rugged hills, where the air smelled of sap and the ground held memories deeper than roots. There was the greenhouse his granddad pieced together from salvaged school windows, the tools shed that leaned like it was daring gravy tie, and the trail that trail. It wasn't just a path. It was the heartbeat of the place, winding through pines to a spring that never stopped trickling, even in the dead of winter. Daniel tended it like a ritual, clipping branches, tamping gravel, rerouting runoff when spring floods came. His old dog, Rusty, was buried along its edge under a slate stone, and his father's initials, J.H., were carved into an oak post at the trailhead. That trail wasn't just dirt. It was family, history, something you didn't mess with. So, when Daniel got back from a quick trip to town and saw a steel bar fence cutting his trail in half, complete with a concrete base and a sign screaming, "No entry, Ecological Preservation Initiative," he didn't yell or curse. He just stood there, truck door still open, engine ticking as it cooled, staring at it like it was a bad dream. The concrete was soft, freshly poured, the air sharp with the smell of wet cement. No crew, no trucks, no markers, just this cage dropped like a guillotine on his land. The sign had a name: Susan Miller, NVY Environmental Access Coordinator. Daniel didn't know her, but the title alone, so official for something so wrong, set his jaw tight. He wasn't clueless. The housing sprawl creeping from the North Ridge had been eyeing his land for years, ever since some city planner greenlit a sustainable community that ate up the valley like a VY Russ. Daniel had tossed their glossy mailers promising to unlock his land's potential. But this wasn't a postcard. This was war. That night, he sat on his porch, coffee gone cold in his hand, the trail's glow cut short by steel and arrogance. Sleep didn't come. The next morning, Daniel skipped the sheriff, knew they'd be useless, and drove to the county clerk's office. The clerk, polite but confused, pulled up his parcel and frowned. "Flagged for ecological review last month," she said. "Access can be restricted temporarily." Daniel leaned in. "By who?" She shrugged. "Environmental Initiative Group, county contract. But they shouldn't have authority over private land unless you signed something." "I didn't," Daniel said, voice flat. He got a copy of the zoning change and headed to the group's office, a shiny new building with manicured hedges and a receptionist younger than his boots. Susan Miller appeared, clipboard in hand, smile as fake as the lavender scent in the lobby. "Mr. Harper, we were going to reach out," she said. "No, you weren't," he shot back. She launched into a rehearsed speech about migratory patterns and native undergrowth, words like transitional corridors, dripping from her mouth. Daniel didn't nod, didn't interrupt. When she finished, he said, "That fence is on my land." Susan's smile tightened. "Corridors don't recognize micro-ownership. It's about regional flow." Daniel left without another word. Back home, he walked the trail, tracing its edges like he was reminding the ground it was his. The fence stood like a scar, and the knot in his chest grew heavier. He dug out his deeds, old papers yellowed but clear, stamped with private access, in faded ink. That's when he decided he wasn't begging, and he wasn't waiting. 2 days later, a pale blue envelope arrived, unmarked, with a typed P.O. box and a single page inside. "Access restriction notification," it read, claiming his trail was under ecological stabilization measures. No signature, just EIG Enclave West, and a code he couldn't verify. Daniel reread it on his porch, Rusty's old water bowl collecting pine needles nearby. It wasn't just bold, it was surgical. He called an old friend, Tom, from the assessor's office, who owed him for clearing flood debris years back. Tom checked the records. "Your parcel's exempt," he said. "But they filed a sneaky overlay permit, buried the notice in the county paper's classifieds. No one saw it, so they claim it's legal." Daniel got a scan of the permit and found a lawyer, Emily Reed, 2 counties over. She'd seen this playbook before: hit rural owners with vague rules until they fold. Within hours, she sent him a cease and desist letter tailored with his property lines. Daniel drove it to Susan's office, where the receptionist refused it, chirping about a digital portal. He slid it under Susan's door anyway, just out of the camera's VYEW. 3 days passed. The fence stayed. Then a new notice appeared, laminated and bolted to the bars, threatening municipal penalties for interference with stabilization infrastructure. Trespass on his own land. That night, a storm rolled in, rain pounding so hard it drowned the treetops. Daniel watched from his shed as water spilled off the trail, choking his wildflower patch because of the fence's concrete posts. By morning, he'd yanked out a hidden camera pole he'd spotted blinking in the trees, setting it on his truck's hood like a trophy. Emily warned him. "They're building a case to paint you as destructive. Document, don't retaliate." But standing still felt like losing. Then came the survey marker, a green flag stabbed into the mud. This wasn't preservation, it was preparation. Daniel's patience was thinning. Another envelope arrived, this one from the county, claiming a hearing on protected access zones. That included his trail. The registration deadline had passed deliberately. They were erasing him, step by step, with paper and silence. He found rubber mats on the moss, orange string in the trees, markers for pipes or trenches. Emily confirmed it. "This is infrastructure, not ecology. They're building under your land." Daniel didn't wait. He hired Jake Willis, a drone operator who'd map fire zones, to fly over the trail. The footage showed buried cables, reflectors, a solar-powered relay hub, proof of a network, not a nature project. Emily called it enough to halt them, but Daniel knew time wasn't on his side. A man in a gray suit, Ethan Cole from Ridgelink Resource Partners, showed up, offering cash and utility revenue shares to integrate the trail. Daniel handed him a folder with the drone shots, his deed, and the 1982 trail survey. "Try eminent domain," he said. "See how that goes." That night, the trail's gate was chained again, a new sign reading, "Authorized access only. Surveillance enforced." The rain came back, heavy and cold. Daniel stood at his window, the new chain glinting under his motion light. He'd been patient, played by their rules, but they kept pushing. No more trucks, no more flags, just silence, the kind that meant they were planning something worse. Emily's injunction was filed, but it'd take weeks. Weeks they'd use to dig deeper. Daniel drove to the municipal archives, digging up a 1984 map confirming his trail's water easement, signed and sealed. It was proof, but proof wasn't enough anymore. Then he saw it, his gate, wide open, tire marks from an ATV, boot prints by Rusty's grave. Someone had stood there, taunting him. Daniel locked his doors, opened his lockbox, and set up a trail cam, hidden low in the pines. 3 nights later, it caught a masked man planting sensors by the spring, pausing to stare at the camera before vanishing. Emily's voice was sharp. "They're framing you as paranoid, erratic. Lay low." But laying low felt like GIVYing up. A week later, the silence broke. An unmarked envelope taped to his gate accused him of unauthorized watershed modification, with blurry photos of him by the spring and his trail cam wiring. A handwritten note on a map of his land read, "Multiple compliance failures." A county inspector parked outside, watching for an hour, never approaching. The next morning, his shed was disturbed, seeds spilled, maps unfolded. They were inside his lines now, daring him to snap. Emily said they'd file a complaint next, flood a hearing with fake reports. "Act soon," she warned. So Daniel did. He boxed every flag, rod, and sign, laying them in the mud by the ridge. That night, his sensor lights caught two figures fleeing, Leah viewing a dead rabbit nailed to a tree by Rusty's grave. "Keep your distance," carved into its fur. Daniel buried it, his hands steady but his mind locked in. He hired a surveyor, Ray Holt, who found fresh cable runs under the spring, illegal and hidden. Daniel boxed the proof, stashed it in his truck, and waited. Then they went too far. A new gate, not on the trail but across his driveway, concrete anchors dug into his gravel, a sign declaring, "Restricted Development Zone." It wasn't a fence, it was a siege. At sunrise, Daniel stood by his Ford, keys in hand, the mist heavy around him. He grabbed a rusted chain, a crowbar, bolt cutters, and drove to the gate. He looped the chain around the bars, hooked it to his bumper, and pressed the pedal, slow and sure. The gate fought, metal screaming, concrete cracking, sparks flashing as wires snapped. It collapsed, mangled. Daniel loaded the wreckage and drove to Ridgelink's office, dumping it piece by piece on their perfect lawn. Susan Miller stepped out, flanked by Suits, her voice icy. "What do you think this accomplishes, Mr. Harper?" Daniel tossed a folder at her feet. Drone shots, Ray's scans, Emily's injunction letter. "That was on my land," he said. "You want court? I'll be there." Susan's mouth twitched. "You've escalated this." Daniel didn't blink. "You started it when you stepped over Rusty's grave. I'm just ending it." A sheriff's deputy showed up at his gate later, no sirens, just questions. "Took back what's mine," Daniel said. The deputy checked his tablet, saw the injunction, and left. That night, Daniel sat on his porch, the trail open behind him, the wind soft. The silence wasn't tense, Anna Marie, it was his. Days later, the county dropped the complaints, suspended Ridgelink's easement, and withdrew the spring claim. No apology, but Daniel didn't need one. He walked the trail again, rake in hand, replanting where the posts had torn the earth. A white SUV passed once, didn't stop. A week later, Emily called. "You won. It's yours, on paper and in fact." Daniel nodded, said thanks, and hung up. That night, under a moon so bright it lit the rocks like glass, he walked to Rusty's stone, crouched, and said, "It's done. For now." Then he walked home, no need to look back. They'd come again, someday, but they'd know what way eat a man who'd tear down their gates and make them listen.